Good evening, good evening, good evening. I hope you are well. We're going to wait for a few more people to come. It's been a long day for me, so you have to excuse the black eyes because it's 10 p.m. my time. So I will try and bring as much energy as I can do to this. So I really appreciate you rocking up on a Wednesday night. And we only do them like once a month, or we try and do them once a month. Just to kind of cover some big topics that we can do, which I can't cover in like podcasts or YouTube or Instagram or within your own one-to-one coaching as well. So I like to take the opportunity to go diving deeper into different opportunities and different topics as we can then help as well on that side of things. So as we go through the process of chatting about this, if you do have any questions or you do want to kind of pop out the chat, just drop something in the chat if you want to, or equally you can just shout out after I give opportunities for questions and stuff like that. So let me just see if I can see a different view on here. So let's take this away whilst we go through this. So the main aim of today is to go through effectively how do we avoid gaining weight or getting fat after you've gone through your transformation, as you've gone through your ability to, get all this weight off and you've worked damn hard to do it. So I want to go through exactly what that means and what we have to look at and what the differences is over this time period. A lot of people make mistakes and I want to make sure that I avoid that. I spent the whole of my 20s yo-yo dieting, gaining 10 kilos, losing 10 kilos. I'd lose 20, put 21 back on. It was a game of dominoes and it was terrible. And I learned some really, really valuable lessons now, being able to stay in shape and obviously do my thing the way I can do it now, where don't have really any issues around food. I can stay at whatever body weight I want to, and ultimately gave myself that autonomy and freedom to be able to do that. So let's dive into this a little bit. I'm sure more people will come as we go through this too. So let's do this. So the goal is to help you never get fat again, right? So that's one of the biggest things that bring everyone in this room and everyone that is part of Autonomy. One of the biggest things that brings us together, whether we have all different goals, 5 kilos lost, like Prakash, 50 kilos lost, 25 kilos lost, drop a dress size. We all have one thing in common, which is we never want to gain the weight back, whether you've lost 1 or 50. And it always brings us together, because this is what basically autonomy is about. This is what we try and base every conversation we have within the team, everything I do to make the business as best as it can do to help you guys from a coaching perspective is all with this one thing in mind. I don't care if people lose 5, 10, 15 or 20 kilos. I just care that whatever they lose, they never gain it back, because it's quite simple. Whatever you lose, you want to keep off. If I save £1 million, I want to bloody use it to the best of my ability. I don't want to give it back away. So with that premise, let's dig into that. So first element is to look at why people get fat after a diet in the first place. Well, firstly, it's because diets aren't meant to be sustainable. Most people think that you do a diet and then you stay on that diet for a long period of time, and then you then come off it some days and then you come back on it some other days. But I want to get super clear that a diet and the way that you have to diet, which is eat less food and you have to do more exercise and you have to control your portions really, really accurately, they're not meant to be sustained over a long period of time. They're meant to be done for a set time period. And then afterwards, you're meant to then learn the maintenance side of things. We have to break the barrier that most people believe when they start a diet or they start something, is that people believe that that's what they're going to continue doing for the next 20 years. And it's not true. That's how I yo-yo dieted. I believe that what I was doing on the diet, I had to do afterwards, or equally, whatever I had to do on the diet, I didn't want to do anymore. So I did the exact opposite for the next 16 weeks. And now I gained my 20 kilos. It's either all or nothing, or people believe that they have to do the same thing. So I want to encourage you today, to look at your diet, the 5 kilos that you want to lose, the 10 kilos that you want to lose. It's a short time frame to do some extra bits and bobs, to go out of your way to build those habits, to say no a few more times. Because we know afterwards, and which I'm going to present to you later, is that there's something afterwards that is worth sacrificing for, and that it doesn't have to be all sacrifice and, saying no to everything later down the line. So diets are unsustainable. They're not meant to be sustainable. They're meant to be losing weight, and then you don't diet anymore, because if you continue to diet, you'd lose weight, further weight, which you wouldn't want to do. And you'll have your aunties moaning at you about, yeah, you're looking ill, something like that, and we don't want that. So let's break this down. where is my, there it is. So when we're looking at dieting and when we're looking at maintaining, everything involved when you're doing your nutrition, your consistency, how well you're following the diet, how well you're doing your steps, how well you've got a routine, how well you say no to extra chocolates within your brain and the cravings. They're all habit related and they're all skill development related. So when I was in my 20s, I went through 4 diets and I can remember it very, very distinctly. On the first diet, I lasted 4 weeks before I had a takeaway. On the second diet, I worked harder, so I lasted 8 weeks until I had a takeaway, and then worked, and so on and so forth. And I built up my ability to build a skill, the skill of consistency, the skill of adherence, the skill of the right portion sizes. And I want you to view everything that we do with you as not just, oh, we're telling you to do this to lose weight, but we're actually teaching you a skill to get better with. And equally, then when the highs and the lows and you fall off track and you come off track and you come back on track, you can view it differently than thinking you're crap, you're never going to do it. And you view it as a skill and how far you've come developing that skill. So you might get 4 days without eating a chocolate bar. And then the week after that, you might get 5 days. Or you might have the portion sizes the right amount for 7, 14 days. And then you might fall off it and then you get back on it. And it's all about developing these diet related skills. So as we go through your diets and the way we help you, we're going to help you with nutrition accuracy, how accurate your nutrition is for the person you want to be, not the person you were. Look at adequate portion sizes to drop fat, adequate portion sizes to burn, adequate exercise to burn fat. Learn how to say no to old habits. So whether that's the cravings, whether that's the voice in the back of your head saying, "Oh, it won't matter if I have a chocolate bar," or "Oh, it won't matter if I have a few drinks this weekend more than I should do," or "Oh, it doesn't really matter anymore. I'm just gonna do what I want to do." All those skills, the potential skill of accountability. Most people haven't had accountability in their kind of personal life. Maybe they've had it in work where they've been told to do a task and the project is on the 2nd of December. They've been told that they need to get it for the 2nd of December and therefore they've been held accountable. They may get held accountable at home or in the office or at work, but most people have never been accountable to themselves and they mostly rely on other people to maintain that accountability. So it's about building the skill of accountability, consistency, and managing social events during a fat loss phase. And these are the skills that we aim to teach you within the weekly check-ins, within the daily reports, within the concepts that we try and build you. We're not just telling you to do something, we're actually teaching you a skill. So that if you want a skill and you want to do a diet in the future, all these things will make your diet productive. In 10 years' time, you gain a few kilos after a holiday and you want to come pull it back off, what we've taught you will keep you there. It's not just a meal plan, it's not just follow that one thing. It's the skills that will acquire you these particular elements and these results. Think of dieting or fat loss or even maintenance. It's not a mathematical equation per se, but you have to think of it as A plus B equals C mentality. You do A, you do B, and you get C. And the better you get at A and B, the better the outcomes of C are, and actually the faster the results too, and the more effective they've been. Now, when we're looking at how not to get fat again, you have to view it as if diets aren't sustainable, if you're not meant to do them forever, then what are we doing for the future? What are we doing for the next 20 years? How are we keeping the weight off in the next 20 years? And in those maintenance phases, in those things where we need to learn these skills, it comes down to understanding what it's like to hold your body weight. It's what are the portion sizes for maintenance? How do you adequately exercise during a maintenance phase and how to be healthy and happy for the long term, the next 20 years. You'll be learning the skill of moderation as much as anyone doesn't like moderation. It is a valuable skill to learn when it comes to the next 20 years. The skill of responsibility for your actions too, because if the biggest thing to get in shape, or one of the biggest things to get in shape, is accountability for your actions and learning those habits, the biggest thing for never getting fat again is learning to take responsibility, where you don't have accountability that much anymore. It's not on someone else. It's not on the coach. It's not on your friends to keep the chocolate away from you. It's on you, and it's on the responsibility of you to do the things of maintenance over the longest time period. And these are just skills that I want you to learn when you're looking at what happens after the diet. We need to learn how to balance out life. Work gets super busy. It doesn't mean nutrition needs to go with that too. If we drink a little bit more at weekends, we need to learn how to pull back a little bit during the week. And we ultimately want to make sure that you're having your enjoyment, you're having your cake and eat it whilst you're never gaining weight again. And that balancing act is a skill, and it's a learned behavior, and it's a learned process, which we're going to teach you throughout that. Just for reference, these are the skills that within your weekly check-ins, within your check-in forms, within the daily reports, these are the things and the overarching theories that we're trying to get across to you to make sure that you have the best possible next 20 years staying in shape. And like, for example, if we only do these ones, we don't really learn these ones. And equally, if you only do these ones, but because of the results that you got here, it doesn't automatically mean that you gain these ones. Where one is Taekwondo and the other one is Judo. You can't play them against each other. They are separate entities altogether. So it's important to note that if you never want to get fat again, you don't just look at the diet side. You have to look at the maintenance side, which are totally different skills. And I want to look at what maintenance is not. So maintenance can be, and which is like how to not get fat again. Maintenance is not where you diet forever and then you eat like an asshole for 20% of the week. You know, I've seen a lot of it over my time and my years. People believe that they stay on the diet 5 days a week and then they just eat what they want at weekends and then it balances out. Now, whether that balances out now or it balances out in 4 weeks' time, I can guarantee you those people that are doing that I've saw over the last 10 years are not the people that are in shape right now, because the dieting for the 80% of the week in 4 years' time gets 70%, it gets 60%, the little treats come in, it becomes 50%, and then they still eat like crazy at the weekends. So it ends up being like a 20-80 split in the opposite direction when people are losing focus. So you want a different alternative, and you don't want to think like the dieting is going to stay forever. Also, dieting maintenance is not following your diet and accidentally maintaining your weight. So if you go through the process of, for example, in your dieting phase, and let's say, for example, you're not as consistent as you thought you were, or maybe there's some social events that you had and you end up maintaining your weight and you're like, oh, great, well, at least I maintain my weight. During a dieting phase, that's absolutely fantastic. But when you come to maintenance and learn how not to get fat again, that's not maintenance. That's effectively failed dieting. And there's a different process that goes into maintenance that actually makes it easier, makes it better, makes it more has greater longevity. And it all ultimately creates a better lifestyle for you, as opposed to, you know, being on a diet and then not being on a diet at the weekends. And if you want to gain weight, ultimately eat the way that you did before autonomy. The habits that you had before, especially the more weight that you lose, and I can't stress this enough, and like Prakash is a big shiny example here, is like the more weight that you lose, the more your habits are absolutely night and day different. And unfortunately, when we're looking at dieting and then staying in shape afterwards, when you lose 15, 20, 25, 50 kilos, you almost have to become a different person, because if we put our cards on the table and be honest, it's like to gain 50 kilos or to gain 40 kilos, you have to eat large amounts of food and alcohol and over a longer period of time, which means that a normal portion of food for someone that's gained 50 kilos might be 2 plates of food. It might be 6 rotis and some sweets after. But to be able to stay in shape, that's where you have 2 rotis and, you know, some normal stuff on the side and less frequency of completely overeating. So if you want to move away from gaining weight again, you have to realize there is a cost to the admission of living in shape forever. So in short, without my terminologies, and maybe I'm overcomplicating this for some people, if you act like you did before, you're going to get what you did before. If you act like you have some different habits in different ways, you're going to get something different. And there's always a cost. So to be, you know, 180 kilos, for example, there's a cost to be there, and it's normally your health. But equally, when you're staying in shape, there's also a cost too, which means that you will have to do things that maybe your friends, family, your other people that don't understand what's going on won't understand why you're doing it. So for example, like if you're a small female, let's say, for example, if you finish your diet on 50 or 60 kilos, the price to admission of living in shape as a 50, 60 kilo female is that you will have to do like quite a high level of exercise on a day-to-day basis to be able to not just have very, very low calories on a day-to-day basis, because you don't burn that many calories. The cost to admission is probably having one nice treat meal a week or off-plan meal a week, as opposed to 3. which you may have been used to previously. The cost of admission to be able to never gain weight again might be that you have a body weight range of where that you stay between. And if it gets too high, you go back on a diet. That's like the cost of admission of staying in shape forever. But no one really talks about those because everyone just focuses on the dieting side of things. So it's always a case of you have to change your habits and your approach and your mindset about what to expect after, so that you don't get disappointed that if you want to go back to the habits that you were before, you're not going to stay the same, because that's what got you there in the first place, and we're trying to move you away from it. So it's just an important factor. And if anyone has any questions along the way, just let me know, because I have been speaking for the last like 15 hours, so I probably will ramble for a little bit. So when we talk about the cost of admission of not gaining weight again, then these are probably my primary forces of doing that. Now, they might be simplified, they might be really short, and they might not go into super detail, but it's really important to note that if you never want to gain weight again, it's never about discipline. It's never about motivation. It's never about the swings and the roundabouts of life, because they're going to be there regardless, and discipline and motivation will waver. But it's, are you focusing on these cost of admissions on a day-to-day basis more often than not? And I can hand on heart say that if you get all of these and you tick these off over a year period, a 2-year period, you will never go far beyond a 1 to 4 kilo range above your body weight, which is absolutely fantastic, right? If you lose 25 and you hold 0 to 4, that's an absolute win. And actually, before I go into that, lots of people make the mistake of thinking that when you hit a weight target of your diet, let's say, for example, let's call it even 65 kilos, you finish at 65 kilos. Most people think that you don't go anywhere, 65 on the dot, and you stay there for 20 years. That's not particularly true. That's why we use a range. So depending on how many poos you've had a day, where you are in your menstrual cycle as a female, how your stress is, how much sleep that you've had, what type of food sources you're having, and how much alcohol you're having. Your weight will fluctuate on a day-to-day basis. It's important not to get a number fixated that you're going to stay at forever. Firstly, if you took the scales away and you looked yourself in the mirror and you were happy with the way that you look, that's the most important thing. Whether the scale says 65 or 65.4, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything in your life. Coming from someone that has been super scale focused, and I didn't want to see ever anything above 69 kilos. And when I seen 69.1, I nearly jumped out the window. But I got moved away from realizing that when I took the scale weight away, the way I had a relationship with myself in the mirror when I was brushing my teeth and I was butt naked, I actually was fine. There was no difference. So it's good to understand there's always a weight range that you want to stay between. So let's break down the cost of admissions to stay in shape forever. So you won't act as you did before on frequent occasions. So there are still times now where I eat like an idiot. Me and Declan was over here, and we spent a weekend getting absolutely boozed, and we had lots and lots of food. But that's a very frequent occasion. Well, it's a frequent occasion for Dec, but it's a very infrequent occasion for me. So I was able to have, a weekend where I was doing, we went to a very, very fun nightclub and jumping around and dancing around, crazy stuff. But that was an infrequent occasion. Whereas maybe before you started Autonomy, that was a frequent occasion. Maybe that extra two cakes a week, and then a nice starter main desserts twice on the weekend, and maybe a breakfast out and then some snacks. If they're all frequent occasions, then you'll need to taper them down to something a little bit more adequate. Like I said, you can't go back to where you were before because you get what you got before. So tapering down and take enjoyment for less. There's something I spoke to Sirish about when he was doing his journey. I don't think he's on the call. I think he said he was going to be on, but I don't think he is. So one thing I said to Sirish when he was going through his journey to losing the weight that he did is that the key with maintenance, and I should put this in the slide, but whatever, it's like the key to maintenance is getting the most from the least, as opposed to the most from the most. And having that mentality of being able to enjoy a piece of cheesecake the way that you used to enjoy 2 pieces of cheesecake or 3 pieces of cheesecake. Or in pizza terms, if you can enjoy a small pizza the way that you enjoyed a large pizza a year ago or 2 years ago, you're going to be absolutely fine to manage your nutrition in the long term. And it's something I prided myself on, is like now I rarely ever get large, medium pizzas, because the taste of 6 pieces versus 8 pieces, this quantity of 6 versus 8. I don't even know if they come in 6 or 8. I'm just making it up, but I never cut mine. I just fold over. But like, if you look at the differences between 6 and 8 pieces, what is the realistic difference outside of that's what you've always picked previously? And if someone can tell me the psychological or physiological benefits of having 8 pieces of pizza over 6, they get free coaching. But like, if you can break down getting the most from the least when it comes to your occasions and the way that you eat and the way that you value food, you'll never have an issue around over consuming food. One of the biggest things we do is teach people how to have one of things. There's always biscuits in the fridge, no one puts biscuits in the fridge, but if there's biscuits in the cupboards, a total full pack, and you can't just have a few of them, then that's a big sign of you not being able to maintain in the future. It's one of the things that we work on massively with our clients. Is like, if you can't have biscuits in the fridge, if the cupboard at all, or you can't just have 3 or 4 of them and be absolutely fine, that's a very good sign that you're not in a situation that right now, with the habits that you have, you're going to maintain for the longest time. So just something to consider on that. Get the most from the least and appreciate the biscuit that you had, or the 2 biscuits, or the 3 biscuits that you had, or the 3 pieces of pizza that you had, as opposed to not having any or having 8 pieces. Some of the cost to admissions. Your normal portions will be smaller. That's what I just said, get the most from the least. And the third one is like the balancing act of the cost of admission of staying in shape. Most people that stay in shape longer term have some commonalities, and one of them is exercise. Whether it's weight training, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's doing Pilates or classes, there's always a commonality that they always have some form of exercise in, not just from a fat loss or maintenance perspective, but actually just in general from a health perspective. But the biggest determining factor is steps. As most of you might know, and if you don't, this is a knowledge bomb, you'll burn more calories from 10,000 steps on a day-to-day basis than you will 3 workouts. Just take that into consideration when you're looking at its biggest bang for your buck. Second of all, why steps are so important is that the mortality rate, so unfortunately morbidly, is if you have less than 10,000 steps on a day-to-day basis, you have an increased chance of early death versus someone that does 10 to 15,000 steps by a landslide. We're talking like 30, 40%. So most of the research are now coming out, and you'll probably see this in the future on like men's health or the back of the sun or something like that. I don't know if it'll be on the sun, but is that it can increase your life expectancy by about 10 years if you do 10 to 15,000 steps on a day-to-day basis, which is wild. 10 years, it's a long time. You can do a lot in 10 years. And therefore, with those 10 years as well, is that steps will burn a lot of calories. And the problem with like the low exercise, you do low exercise on a day-to-day basis, you also have to have lower food, because you can't just eat what you want. You have to eat to the right of your body weight. So therefore, if you don't do as many steps, you don't get as much food on a day-to-day basis, and you may overconsume over time because you're not feeling like you're actually eating into a proper lifestyle. So it's always good to know that. For me personally, before I got my knee replacement, before my knee actually was giving me absolute crap, I'd make sure that even if I was eating a bit more, I was always consistently doing 10 to 20,000 steps on a day-to-day basis, because it gave me more wiggle room. It gave me more food on a day-to-day basis. And if I enjoy food, which I do, I don't want to be eating less than I actually should be able to, just by not going for a walk in the evening, or just not by going for a walk in the afternoons, which then saved me a bunch of food that I could eat in the evenings and the weekends. The cost of admission as well is like the unemotional data management, which is, we need a hard, firm set point, right? The give an inch, take a mile is a massive thing within your own self. Like, if you haven't got that true responsibility, which no one has, no one is 100% true to themselves in their decision-making and their accountability with themselves. No one is 100%. So having a weight range allows you to cut your own BS when you see and step on the scales. Your relationship with the scales also is going to be one in which is going to be utilized for good. So another commonality outside of exercise and portion sizes to people staying in shape and never gaining fat is actually stepping on the scales on a day-to-day frequent basis. Those that step on the scales daily and manage their and log their weight will be in like 80% extra chance of staying in shape or not gaining fat than people that don't weigh themselves. Because we get in that cycle, right? I don't know if anyone's been in that cycle where they avoid things. It's what our human brain is meant to do. When it's painful or when it might be a negative reaction, we end up detaching, or we end up moving away from the thing that's going to give it the answer that we don't actually want. Whereas if we can get in a situation where we're actually weighing ourselves more frequently, we're not emotional with it, it's 65.1 today, 65.4 tomorrow, 65.3 the next day, 66 after the recovery, back down again. It doesn't really matter, but taking that number allows you to stay accountable for the next 20, 30 years, because when you have a weight range and you have the number consistently, you can do something about it when you hit that top point. We've all been through those phases where, latter like years gone by where we just ignored the numbers. We told ourselves we were fine. I just bought the dress size up, or I just bought the t-shirt up, and I just kind of ignored it. And when you do that, you obviously problems that just are left untouched are just doubled, and then you double, and the problems compound because we leave it. Any problem that we have, the longer we leave it, the worse it gets. And therefore, then someone ends up gaining 20 kilos before they actually make the changes. Whereas I don't want that to happen to you again. So whatever relationship you have with the scale, we have to create one in which it's great for you to maintain long term if we have a weight range. So the reason why we go 0 to 4 kilos and not like 0 to 1 kilos or 0 to 1.5 is because if you have a big weekend and you're at maintenance and you've had a nice burger and chips and a few little pints of roos or something like that, your weight will jump up. Like when I went out with deck, my weight was up 2.5 kilos the day after, and that was just from Corona. A lot of Corona, bear in mind. But that then doesn't allow us the flexibility. Now we'd have to go on a diet if the weight range was so small, and most of us don't give ourselves enough wiggle room to actually be okay with fluctuations, and that's really important. So having a 0-4 kilo range means that you would have had to do something significant for a longer period of time to gain 4 kilos, whether it's a holiday, whether it's a 4 weeks back to back where you've had multiple socials and it's just creeped and creeped and creeped. As soon as you hit that top point, that's when you say to yourself, I don't want this to continue, so now I have to do something about it. And that's the responsibility part I spoke about before. But having that cap just helps massively. I still do it to this day. I have a weight range of where I sit between 71 and 77. I go bigger because I don't really care about my physique at the moment, because it's absolutely fine between those numbers. If I go away from the holidays, it'd be down 71, 72. If I'm like eating Deliveroo every day like I am right now, it's 76. But I never go above 77 because that's my tipping point where I feel like I look like a potato, and I don't want to look like a potato. I don't mind having a little bit of chunk, but not too much that I have to go up in a t-shirt size. So having that weight range is really, really important. And then the last thing about the cost of admission to think about from a weight management perspective is that you're not going to be able to say yes to everything anymore, because sometimes you have to lose. Like sometimes you're going to have to compromise some things that you used to do in the social events and the things that you want. And that comes normally back to cravings, and it comes back to the desire for the things that you had before. So almost like this, it's called, I just had a call with Bhavna, not sure, Bhavna, I don't know if she's on the call, but basically we just waved goodbye to her today and we literally kicked her out. And I've actually got, who's on this call as well, I've got Shreya, I've got a call with her next week, I believe it is, to kick them out, because they're in a position where they can do that now. They've lost a bunch of weight and now they're maintaining. And one of the things I was actually talking to Shreya about in our check-in this week was like this, the art of giving and taking. When we're over consuming, and let's be serious, when we are in that stage of we have gained a lot of body weight, we're not thinking about what do I have to give back for what I've taken. So if I take 4,000 calories today, you're not thinking, oh, I need to give back tomorrow. Thanks, Abs. Speak to you soon. I'll see you tomorrow, actually. And if we always take, we're never going to balance out. For example, this is like moderation and balance. Whereas when we're looking at staying in shape and not gaining fat again, we have to give and take. The game is numbers. The game is our bodies in calories, intake and outtake. We have to balance the books. So if we always have that consuming mindset of like, I'll take all these social events, I'll do what I want, there'll always be backlash. And I think the best people that do not gain their weight back after a diet have the mindset of, I'm going to have this, but to have this, I have to give something back. The cost of admission, the price to pay. And if you have that mindset, whether it's like changing your snack in the evening for an ice cream from the ice cream van, that's a perfect example. Or I'm not going to have breakfast today because on the way to work, I'm going to get a coffee and a croissant. It's a give and a take. It's not, I'm going to have breakfast and then I'm also going to have a coffee and croissant. Or, if I'm having some beers tonight, I probably won't have a large lunch tomorrow, and I probably wouldn't have had a large lunch the day before. The cost, the pros, the pushes and minuses, the cost, the benefit, the pushing and the pulls. So that is probably my biggest thing right now, is like, with people that are learning to stay in shape forever, is like, okay, so you had this, what did you give up for it? And as much as that might be a morbid and me, sitting there like the guy, is that ultimately everything has a cost and a benefit, and we need to work out what we're giving back for what we're taking. So if you're having some extra drinks at the weekends and you don't like the idea of taking away food, then you can do more exercise, you can do more steps a few days before or afterwards to kind of balance that out. Now, I wouldn't say that's a long-term thing where you're like, I went boozing this weekend massively, now I need to cut out loads. That's not the mentality. But on the spot decisions, whether it's an ice cream, whether it's a handful of peanuts, whether it's, a chocolate bar or part of the kids' food or a piece of birthday cake, they're easy to manipulate, the pluses and the minus, because you can just go, well, if I have this birthday cake, I'm not going to have my snack. Or if I have this handful of nuts, I'm not going to have my snack. Or if I have a big lunch, I'm going to not have a big dinner. Small adjustments like that will keep you staying in shape forever, I can promise, because you're balancing the books. And it might not be a perfect balance of the books. One might be 300 calories, the other one might be 500, but you're doing damn better than you would do if you didn't take anything away. And that's the most important part, is that you're doing something about it. And now I want to teach you about when you're going to be learning this and why it's super important to kind of go through the motions. So if the way to never gain weight again is to learn the skills, so we're learning the skills of the cost of administration, the cost of admission, we're learning the skills of maintenance here with nutrition accuracy, learning moderation, learning responsibility for your actions, learning how to have a social life that you want, how to have your cake and eat it. And equally, we're learning the skills of dieting. Then when do we learn these as part of the autonomy process? And it's really, really cool that obviously we have our 6 phases, probably don't talk about it enough, don't put it on socials enough, that's for sure. But I want you to know that if you are wanting to never gain weight again, this is where you practice it here. The reason why we can't practice it between 1 and 4 is because we're practicing the diet skill set. We're practicing what happens in the diet, which you can't practice maintenance at the same time. As I mentioned, it's like Kung Fu and fucking Judo. They're different things. So you almost have to learn French first, then learn Spanish afterwards. That's the kind of analogy that I'd like you to take home from it. And I want you to view this as like, it's not enough to maintain your weight forever, and there's research and everything to prove it, not enough just to go on a diet and think you'll be good afterwards. And that's why we created Autonomy. If I'm being honest, like, we created Autonomy because I was sick of taking people on diets and then them gaining the weight back, and going to Pret 3 months after, around the corner from the gym that I used to work at, and have, people come back and gained all their weight back. Or even more recently, just before Autonomy, is even with my online clients with the other company I was working with, we have clients from that company right now working with us because they didn't do the latter phases. And that's what Autonomy is about. It's like, it's the understanding that maintenance and dieting are completely separate parts of it, but we want to get both of them so that we never have to go and gain weight again. We never have to, use a coach again. We never have to take anything else other than ourselves through this journey. So when you're looking at maintenance, you're going to be learning it here. So once you've reached that goal and you've hit the skills that needed to go on a diet, then you're going to be able to learn the practice, the long-term solution, the maintenance at phase number 5. For some of you, time will be one of those things where you're asking, like, how long is it going to take? Like, obviously people are on time frames. They want to make sure that they're making value out of the time, whether it's the time of the year, etc., with the holidays and stuff. But ultimately, people ask me all the time, it's like, well, how long does this journey take? I can only tell you one part of it, is that the research guarantees that if you maintain for a year after you've lost your weight, and you maintain within, a 0 to 4 kilo ranger, you will then keep it off for the next 20 years at like a 90% chance. If you do less than 3 months of maintaining your weight, you have like a 90% chance that you'll gain it back. So when we're looking at why we do like a 6 months maintenance, is because we care about your long term. And you might be okay for 1 month, you might be okay for 4 months, you might be okay for 6 months. But the long-term studies where they followed these people for 20, 30 years has the same outcome every time. If you practice maintenance and you hold your weight down and you do it properly for 6 to 12 months, you absolutely profoundly increase your probability that you're staying in shape. If you do it for less than 3 months, you're literally decreasing your chances of all the work that you've done going down the drain. You're actually increasing the chances that your work is going down the drain by like 80% chance too. So that's why we do what we do. And we can never put a time frame on the diet side of things, because that's just how long a piece of string. It's based on your habits, discipline, situation, and goal. But the maintenance side of things, that is a science. That's an art. That's us breaking down all of these cost of admissions, all of these elements of what the skills that you need to learn, and putting that into your check-ins, putting that into your daily reports, putting that into the actions that we give you, so that when you leave us, that you actually have all of these, and that you never, never, ever gain your weight back again. So I know that's a highline view. I know that's me talking for 20, 30 minutes. I'd love to know if you've got any questions. I'd love to know if you've got any specific examples of things that you struggle with that you'd like some help with. And you can ask me anything, whether it's stuff that is related to this or other stuff too. So guys, if you have any questions, let me know. And whilst you get your questions in the chat, Dec, have you got any experiences from the guys that you've been working with on things that are super important to know outside of this?
So first of all, can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay, cool. So I think some of the key points that I would like to highlight is number one is like you said, like completely separate things. Weight loss and maintenance, two different skill sets, two different learnings, and one without the other is somewhat useless. And it doesn't matter if you've been dieting for 3 months or 3 years. It doesn't matter if you've lost 2 kilos or 50 kilos. In my experiences, if you do not do maintenance, you will return back to your old ways. You will regain that 20, 30 kilos. You will go back to old habits. Like I said, even if you faked maintenance it during, your last whatever several months of dieting, it's definitely not the same thing. It's definitely a completely different skill set. And when clients actually move into maintenance and go through all the separate skill sets that we work on within maintenance, whether that's increasing the amount of food they consume, the flexibility within the food, getting them to step away from tracking and managing their nutrition, that over time is what builds confidence that they can actually do this long term. And the fact that when they are doing this, they're seeing, as Nathan said, that their weight is holding within that specific range. And that's ultimately what builds confidence over time. It's like, oh my God, I haven't weighed out or tracked my food for the last 2 weeks, yet my scale weight is held within a kilo. I've had back-to-back socials this weekend. I've gone away with the family on holiday. I've had a super stressful week at work where I wasn't able to get to the gym, but I stayed on top of my nutrition. And again, all of these different things that you come across in weight loss, you'll also come across them again in the maintenance phase, but it's just very different in terms of how you handle them. Yet, in terms of what that brings to the table for your own specific confidence is huge.
Good question here, Shreya, actually. Should your ideal weight range generally be proportional to how much you've lost? The answer is yes. And I don't want to complicate this because I tried to make it simple. So thanks for the share. Is the more you've lost, the higher your blowback, pushback. Yeah, not blowback. The higher, that's a smoking term. The more that you can pull back. So generally for people that have lost 50 kilos, you would probably expect more like 10% of it coming back on. So most people between 5 to 10% is a normal weight increase. And that's why we give the 0 to 4 kilo range, because someone that's 100 kilos loses 20 kilos, then they're 80 kilos now. That's basically then they can put on 10%, which is 4 kilos. So you can see how that is. We based it on a 100 kilo person. So if you're coming from like over 100, or you have it's more proportional to the weight that you've lost. So if you've lost 20 kilos or 40 kilos, then it will be relative to that too. But in my experience, that's the science. But I've never seen anybody who lost more in a long period of time really return. Now I'll explain that. Is because the more you have to lose, the more you have to practice these skills, right? So if you lose 50 kilos like Prakash, he's like locked in with his variables to some degree. Maybe consistencies, it can be obviously improved all of the time, but he's locked into the habits. So he's had to practice that for one and a half years of being near enough spot on with steps, with his nutrition, with his lifestyle, with saying no. He's had to say no more because he's done it for a year and a half, and he's had to do it for a longer period of time. So I don't generally see, when the coaching is done right and the methodology is cool, that plays out. I think it does in like, oh, I'll give you a shake diet for 12 weeks and let's see how much you weight regain, because that's kind of some of the research, which is terrible. So the answer is yes, but not to high degrees. I would say max 1 kilo, 2 kilos for someone that's lost over like 30, 40 kilos. But at the same time, it's anything between 5 and 10% is a normal range, if that makes sense. So let's get some questions in there, right? Because this is a big topic. All of you have one commonality, whether, you know, one of you is losing 5 kilos, another one's losing 20 kilos, another you is losing 25, 50 kilos. But you have one commonality in this room, that you all want to keep the results. So let's get some questions. And you can unmute yourself if you'd like to. Actually, that's a very good question. Would you lose more weight than originally planned so that you can stay in the weight range? That's a good question. So let me tell you a secret. So when we do your diets and when we do the stuff that you're working towards, if everything goes to plan when we hit your number, we will generally recommend to kind of get a little bit more if you're motivated and you're happy. Obviously, if you're super happy and you're like, I just want to stay 60, I'm good. And 61 doesn't matter to me too much. But if you're like, I want to stay in that 60-ish zone, we'll probably recommend you lose a little bit more. Now, the only reason we say that is because you do have wiggle room, but at the same time it's based on a visual look. Like if your fat loss goal, what you're doing this for is based on how you look, and there might be a difference between like 58 and 61, especially if you're a small female. Like I'm 5'5". If I gain 3 kilos, I can see it. So if you want to stay at that optimal physique, the one that you hit, let's say, for example, the goal is 60 kilos, and you wanted to stay 100% on there because of the visual changes, then you can take it to anywhere between like 58.5 and 59, but only if that doesn't create complacency with you having a bigger wiggle room. The wiggle room is the same. It's 0 to 4 kilos. But if you lose more, it's more for the benefit of the way that you look, not because you've got now 6 kilos to put on, if that makes sense, because I've seen that before. It's like, oh, I'll lose a bit more so that when I do put it back on, I'll have more weight, or I'll have more room. And it's like, no, that's not the point. 4 kilos is the standard. So yeah, you can do, but it's only based on visual looks. If you don't see a difference in your physique between like 60 and 61 kilos, if that's a number that can be relatable, I wouldn't worry about it. If you like literally are small and really, really petite, and you can notice a difference of like 1-2 kilos, I would say that has benefit if you want that visual change. Whereas I'm not fussed with 1 kilo. I don't think Dex fussed with like 1 or 2 kilos either way, right? So cool. Good question though. These are really good questions. Who's got some more? Oh my God, I'll get at least one more. Three is a good number. There we go. My target was only 7 kilos. I've managed to lose 3 kilos. Well, I find that losing the 3 is so hard. Is it always hard to lose the fat, the last few? Awesome question. Very, very good question. So I'm going to explain something which will change your thought process, hopefully, is that no kilo is harder to lose, but the motivation to do so is less. So I'll take you back. So you might think you have the same motivation, but it's impossible. It's impossible that you have the same motivation to lose 7 than you do for 4, because the weight of 7 is high. So for example, when you joined and you got on a call with me, you were like, I need to do this. I need to do this, right? But you lose a few kilos, and things start to feel a little bit better. You get into the rhythm of things, you see success. So there is no difference because it's mathematic, A plus B equals C. And whatever loses 3 kilos will also lose the other ones because it's the same process. So I would definitely, I think most of it comes down to is when you have a bit of success, but then you struggle with the rest of it. It's down to some level of you're not doing the same thing that you used to do for the other 3 kilos. There will be something, whether it's more consistency on steps or nutrition or doing it for a longer period of time without breaking that consistency. I can guarantee that you will lose the same amount of weight again if you do the same things you did previously, because it's maths. There's only one way that it doesn't look like this, and that is when you've lost a significant amount of weight. So I'll give Prakash as an example, right? So if you're 120 kilos and you lose 1% of your body weight a week, that's 1.2 kilos. Now, if you're 50 kilos and you lose 1% of your body weight, that's 0.5 kilos. They both lost the same amount of weight relative to their body weight, but different on the scales. So the only way it would change, where it would be quote unquote harder, would be if you drop 20, 30 kilos, because the weight loss per week would be less, which means that it would be harder to lose. But if in short, then what I would do is I would have an audit of like what you're doing now versus what you did when you lost 3, and look at the trends between the two of them, and look at what am I not doing, what am I doing well, what is it that I could improve upon, and how many days have I made it doing the things that I'm supposed to do before not doing the things I was supposed to do or guessing. And I guarantee if you look at it from the lens that it's totally natural to have some level of like drop off and complacency, you'll feel better about looking inside and going, actually, yeah, I've probably not done a little bit of this, or I'm not done a little bit of that. And it's never the fat loss's fault or the physiology. It's always this little bastard's fault, which is the brain, because it leads us into that. It leads us into that false sense of security that we are doing all the right things, or it is harder. And it's like, just check what you're doing. And I imagine there will be something that you can see, even if it's a small thing. Like, for example, 2 weeks out from my photo shoot, when I had veins on my abs, I was not losing weight. I'm like, I'm doing the same things every week in, week out. I'm doing 20K steps. I'm doing 40 minutes cardio. I'm eating meals off this plan. And then a week after the shoot, I reflected and was like, why didn't I lose weight in the last 2 weeks? Because I just stalled. And what was staring at me across the room was the bottles of ketchup and the full fat ketchup and the extra condiments and the extra snacks that I'd been having on top of my normal foods, because I hadn't realized I was adding it. I started adding full fat ketchup and mustard, and then a little bit of hummus on the side of my food, not thinking that it was anything different. But then it was the difference, because it's the only thing that I added differently. My nutrition stayed the same. Sorry, my nutrition didn't stay the same. My exercise stayed the same. My cardio stayed the same. And the only thing that was different was something that I didn't think mattered at the time or didn't even recognize. And it was the whole reason why I was not losing. Sometimes the small differences, small things that we just creep in are one of the biggest factors. So yeah, see, there's the cravings, especially after being so disciplined after so long. It's like, yeah, 100%. So let me take you down a craving masterclass for a second. So what we see is that cravings, what we have to recognize what cravings are. So most people think it's like, oh, my body is craving. But the wrong word is not, if we break it down, it's not actually a craving, it's a desire. We desire that thing. We don't crave it because our bodies don't need specific foods. Like my body, inside, my blood type A negative or whatever is not going, Jesus Christ, I need a hamburger today. Or my muscles are not going, oh, my rice bicep, oh, it needs 2 digestive biscuits today. There's no cravings that are there. Our body doesn't crave anything. However, our mind, as I said, is the bastard. It craves what it desires. And therefore, when we look at desire, you can reframe it differently. So the first thing I'm seeing from what you said is that, especially after being so disciplined after so long. So my question would be, in the diet, when you're being disciplined, are you having any foods that you actually like? Are you enjoying your meals? Or are you being quite like stiff upper lip? I'm not on it. I'm not having any chocolate. I'm not having any of this. I'm not having any of that. I'm not doing any socials. And then you are restricting yourself. And when you restrict, you desire more, because if you take something away, you want it even further. So we have to look at the desires. Now, the hardest answer that I have to give you is that desires are relative to something that I want to talk about. Right? So this might make sense and might not be the place to do it because I normally say this with my friends. So if I get cancelled or you hate me after this, it's okay, I understand, but I've got a good sense of humor. So cravings are very similar to a decision between a guy just looking at a girl on the street and cheating on his missus. Most guys' heads are going to get turned all the time, but it's the difference between whether they take action or not. That's the difference. That's cravings. We have a desire, and whatever that desire is, it's up to you. But the difference between a desire and an action and what we do out of the outcome is there. And what we have to remember is that it is a desire, so therefore it's not needed. So when we don't need something, we can say no to it. And if we practice no enough, it becomes part of our evidence. And I would also look at the nutrition setup. So like, for example, like how many days do you get without how many days do you get before you crave, like you eat something? So it might just be a small thing. It might just be a little change. It might be a bite of something. How many days can you go without saying yes to the desire? And if you look at it from that viewpoint, the desires are never going to go away. I still have desires. Me and Dex still want desires of Deliveroos and burgers and pizzas, and there's a time and place for them. But my desires for those foods never change. It's whether I eat them or not is the decision. And over time, your decisions can lead to creating more evidence. And now you get 7 days without desire, turning your head and eating that food. And you get another 7 days. And obviously it makes it harder with various things like, emotional behaviors and things that you're dealing with in your personal life. And as stress and like emotions run higher, the desire for more to cope increases. So there's always that case. Right? So you just have to take that into consideration. But anyway, that's cravings. One is I'm not a therapist, although I do take therapy. I have therapy every single week, and it helps massively. If you want her number, let me know. But what I would say is, when it comes to emotions, is that you have to do two things. One is there is always a reason at the top of the food chain that you're doing that particular thing, and food is the outcome, not the reason. It's not discipline, it's not cravings, it's not the motivation, it's not the desire. It's that most people forget that food or eating food is the thing that happens afterwards, not the thing that made it happen in the first place. So I know for me, when I bottle things up, when I get really pent up and Millie gives me a tough time, I sit in the corner and I mope, and that makes me more emotional, and that makes me more susceptible to going off piece. The more I'm lonely, the more I have less interaction, the less I see my friends. I feel like there's trends that go my way. But I've learned that within myself because I didn't see food as the blaming problem. I didn't see my cravings as a problem. I knew that my cravings were higher because of this problem up here, and I fixed it. I fixed that top problem instead of fixing the food problem. And that's another thing I should have just put on that whole presentation, and hopefully people still watch this right at the end, is that if your relationship with yourself and your emotions relate always back to food, you're in a really sticky thing to maintain. As much as we focus on diet, nutrition, training, and exercise, what's up here often dictates what goes on everywhere else. So getting yourself in a position where you are, being more aware, being more emotionally intelligent with your decisions, solving problems at the root. So if you've got that tough conversation to have with someone, or you're bottling things up and you're not saying something to someone, that's coping inside of you, which needs food to kind of cope, because that's how we deal with it. But if we have that decision, we have that stress, and we deal with it, whether it's financial, whether it's home life, whether it's decisions at work, if we deal with that problem, food doesn't become the outcome. So hopefully that helps in some way. Like I said, I'm not a therapist, but I've done a lot of soul searching over the years. Thanks, Harps. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm glad that you're learned so much from us. Does it make a difference to your weight loss if you consume most of your calories on carbs instead of protein? So the answer is twofold. One is the most simple answer is no. If you eat your calories and it's where it needs to be for fat loss, you'll get all the results that you want, similar to eating the higher protein or carbs. However, there's part of the protein that makes you healthier, better in terms of like cognitive function, brain function. It gets you some essential things in there. Protein has something called essential amino acids, which means if they're essential amino acids. So essential is the key word. If anything's essential, you should probably do it. Brushing your teeth is essential if you don't want a stinky breath. So it doesn't matter to fat loss, but I can tell you with 100% certainty, you will be going without some essential things for brain health. You're going without essential things for muscle tissue and joint health. You'll be going without things that'll make your menstrual cycle better, for example. And therefore you put yourself in a hole just eating higher carbohydrates than protein. And it doesn't have to be super high protein. Like it doesn't have to be like all of your calories are protein, but there just has to be an adequate amount in there, either 3 portions across the day or 3.5 portions across the day. So hopefully that helps. It doesn't change fat loss, but if you do go down the route of higher carb, low protein, you end up being not as full as well. You have to think that protein, like say for example, we're going for the veggie options, the dals, the mock meats, chicken, for example, fish, prawns, they are super satiating compared to other foods. So they keep you full for longer, which means that you don't eat other stuff on your diet. And then they have all these benefits, multivitamin stuff. They have all the stuff like zinc, magnesium stuff, which is going to help with menstrual cycle and brain health, muscle health, joint health, skin health. So yeah, it has mass benefits to it as well. Here we go. Oh, that's a good question, actually. Being a vegetarian, apart from tofu and paneer, the rest comes from ultra processed food. Do you think this will have a health impact? So I don't think so. And the only reason why I say this is because majority of obviously the mock meats and stuff like that are essentially soy based. They're soy based. Now, about 20 years ago, there was some terrible research done on soy and estrogen levels that scared many people, very similar to the research did in the 80s about fat makes you fat or fat increases your cholesterol, which is not true. Body weight, obesity increases your cholesterol, and some genetic factors do, but eating fat does not. Eating like drinking olive oil or having avocados, which are fats or nuts, don't increase your cholesterol. So there's always, every era, there's always one thing that's always misunderstood, then extrapolated to the masses, and then they get the sound bites like, soy increases your estrogen or soy is bad for you. And if you're eating soy 3 times a day, I would 100%, yeah, I wouldn't do it. But it's like, if you were having soy once a day, I wouldn't argue they're processed foods. Like if we took a biscuit, mock meat, a piece of cheese, and what else can we take? Give me some help. What's kind of processed that? Give me a processed food. I don't eat. I'm all clean. I just eat Deliveroo's, so I don't really know what's processed and not.
What you want? Cookies, chocolate, ice cream?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so cereal. So that's it. So like, let's break down what, like, the cereals are really important fact, because I think cereal is one of the most misunderstood foods. Tastes great. It's actually not that processed, because if you think about it, it's puffed rice. That's what some cereals are. So let's say, for example, Cocoa Pops, Rice Krispies, they are like the most non-nutritious based foods in terms of they have no vitamins in, they have no minerals, but they're just puffed rice pieces, which means that they were heated up to a large degree, then they puffed, and then they were sold in a pack with some sugar on top. That's all they were. So processed is dependent, like everything we eat is processed. Like a chicken breast has to come through 7 different places to get to where we get to. That technically can be called process. But if we're looking at like, has it been manufactured? That's probably what we want to look at. Has the food been manufactured? Well, it just depends on the outlook of that. So the Beyond Meat burgers, I don't think any of those things have large implications if you're eating them on a once a day basis or once every other day. The reason why I say that is because what would be the alternative food? So for example, as a veggie, eating tofu and paneer, here's my experience with people that have come to me from like 10 years, like the last 10 years, that have this same mentality around the processed foods, is that this is not you actually, this is just obviously who I've worked with in the past. Those people who are so restricted in their protein sources, they're so restricted with their food sources because they're bound by this processed food matter, that they are clean for 4 or 5 days, and then they pop, and then they have all that processed foods at the weekends, and they go back to clean on the Monday, or they have loads of other things that are loads of different processed foods when they're not on it fully. And the problem with not having a vast variety of food sources, you become bored, restricted, and wanting to break out that bubble very, very quickly, which then doesn't lead to dietary adherence or you staying on a diet long enough because you're eating the same foods over and over again. No one can do that. So I think the cost versus the benefit of the processed foods, there's no health implications to having processed foods. There's no negative implications to having processed foods unless you know what you're getting, which is it's not going to be vitamin and minerals everywhere, but they're just there for protein. Versus people not sticking to their diet, people being bored every day with their food sources, people not having variety or flexibility, and not getting some form of essence of recipes and stuff because they're eating very limited food sources. So for me, I would rather people have loads and loads of variety, loads of flexibility with their food sources, things that look like chicken if you want to have chicken dippers, that type of stuff, versus being really restricted and miserable when you're trying to eat protein. And I think it's depending on where you want to be, but I've never, ever seen a piece of research that has been actually founded. And I'm a geek. When I met Declan, I was hiding in a towel cupboard reading research when I first met him, and he was folding me how to fold towels. Like, I've read enough research to make a library. I've never seen a piece of research that really quantifies anything processed being negative for us, just not as healthy. And not everything in your day needs to be lots and lots of healthy. That's why we recommend having chocolate and cereals and stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question, because most people have quite a strong belief with those things, but I'm all for the processed stuff. And I think as long as you know the doses that you can have them in, and the negatives if you don't have them, for example, like boredom and non-flexible food sources and eating the same foods every day, then I would rather have you not bored and having variety than having you bored and not enjoying eating any protein, and then therefore you don't eat it, and then you stray away from any type of consistent eating. I think that one has a more higher implication than just having some varieties of this chucked into a curry or chucked into a sauce or having it on toast. So I hope that makes sense on that side of things.
Okay, that made good sense.
Pardon?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, it just cut out. So.
I was just saying that was really helpful and made a lot of sense. I think it was getting to a point where I was getting a little bit bored of eating just like the paneer and tofu, and then it felt like lentils they're very calorific, but so I was trying to reduce the calories but still have a high protein. But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that's one of the catches, is because the other foods that are, let's call them complex foods. I don't know that's not a terminology that you should use, but let's say, for example, a lentil is a complex food. It's got high levels of fiber in, it's got some fat grams, that's what they're made out of, and they've got some protein and got quite a lot of carbohydrate. So per gram, you're going to get a bit of everything. It's a bit of protein, it's a bit of carb, it's a bit of fat. But when you're looking at pure protein sources, like you take milk, for example, that's just protein. And therefore the grams per calories will be lower because all it is protein. Every time you take a sip, you're getting protein. Whereas every time you take a bite of lentils, you might be getting a bit of carb, a bit of fat, a bit of protein. So it's one of those where it's hard to stay on lower calories, especially as a smaller female, whilst you're trying to get foods in that aren't good. I think a big lesson here as well is everyone has everyone has beliefs, and this is really important to note as well. I get challenged on mine all the time because I make some rash claims, and we kind of have to back them up and stuff. But most people have beliefs around certain foods and certain food groups that are kind of ingrained in us from years passed down and stuff like that. And it's always worth checking whether that's true or not. And obviously all of you have got coaches, so always go and asking them about those particular things and asking for detailed stuff so you can truly understand. I get it all the time. People are like, granola's great for you, and I'm like, for what? It has super high calories in, and yeah, it's got some nuts, and it's got maybe some clusters and stuff, and it tastes amazing. But is it really like, is it going to be suitable for a diet? That's a different question than healthy. So we have to break down the barriers of the food that we've built up with, so that we can then actually have this autonomous lifestyle where we can have everything that we want and everything that we can choose, when you know the pros and the cons of every scenario. So I'm not going to say to you, don't eat processed stuff or eat processed stuff. I'll just give you the options of what the pros are and what the cons are. And then you can make that decision, which is what we like to do, as opposed to say, no, don't eat that. So hopefully that helps. So any last questions before I go to bed? Let me know. Okay.
Nate, I was
Yeah,
just gonna add in, obviously the bit about the processed food and all that, but just for someone who's been through this process now twice, with two different companies, both times I've had processed, and I'm vegetarian, basically 80% probably plant-based diet, and I've had a lot of processed stuff, but it hasn't affected me. I mean, in theory, I still gain muscle mass. And one thing it will give you high protein intake, which as vegetarians we do struggle. And yeah, people say, oh, it's a myth. It's a myth. Well, partly it's a myth, but we do lack in choice options, especially if you don't eat eggs or if you don't eat other bits. So having the processed plant-based stuff, there's nothing wrong in it, I think. I've had it throughout both my diets, and now in maintenance and lifestyle phase, I still have it on my day-to-day basis. Why? Because it's just quick and easy for me to prep my food. And as Nathan said, like with the scale weight, I'm someone who, again, like him, if my weight goes over what I don't want it to be, then yeah, I'll freak out. But I've now learned to accept it and learned to look in the mirror and be like, I don't like that bit of fluff. So I think I need to shred some weight off, or I'm happy as I am. And this is something I say to my coach all the time, like, I want to be shredded. I don't want to put on any weight, but unfortunately, it's the way life goes. You can't stay shredded forever, unless you're going to smash out 25 to 30K steps a day, and then do extra cardio and have low calories for life. But unfortunately, that's not how lifestyle and maintenance works, in my opinion. You think you need to enjoy, and then just cut back when need to. But yeah, just wanted to add on to that process bit, was where there's nothing wrong in having the process stuff. I personally think, and like Nathan said, there's been no proper research done into why it's a bad thing. So if you're having it, then have it. If it's something you don't want to have, then I'd say don't have it. But personally, gone through it twice and had it through both my diets, I would 100% vouch for it. Yeah, it is expensive, but I would still vouch for it.
Yeah, and like you can just have it in the amounts that you want as well. Like, I mean, from time to time, I still like steal my Mrs. Linda McCartney sausages, so I still have like at least once a week when I run out of food. So it's all good. So guys, I'm gonna call it that. So thank you. And oh, by the way, if you have any, if you want further stuff on this, like how not to gain weight and like the whole maintenance side of things, if you go on my YouTube channel, which is Nathan Johnson, I think it is, or Autonomy, there's a video there that it's called the maintenance pyramid. And that just gives you an understanding of like how life goes after dieting, in terms of like where you can swing the pendulum for more lifestyle, more body composition. Like AJ likes the idea of going, that top tier of that body composition, but there'll be trade-offs for that. And I did a whole video of understanding the trade-offs of where you want to be. If you want to be in that top end of lifestyle and going out 3 days a week, then you will have to expect a little extra body fat accumulation, but that's totally normal. And therefore you can understand the pyramid a little bit better. So yeah. And yeah, actually, I'll see if I can dig out some rebuttals to the all of the processed plant-based stuff claims, and I'll send it over in a WhatsApp group if I can find it. I'll have to just remind myself to put it in my diary for tomorrow, because like it's good for me to kind of explain the nature of it. But if you can see the mechanics of it, like I'm a mechanical person. Like if someone says, here's how you screw in this, and this is how you do it, and this is what you do, and this is how you do it, this is what supports it, I'm going to believe it. Whereas like, it's sometimes it's hard to take on rationale from like someone else just saying it, because I'm just another one person saying the opposite of someone else on Instagram or whatever. So I'll send out I'll see if I can see if I find it, and I'll put it in the WhatsApp group as well. So
Thank you. That would be really good.
no worries. All right, guys, I'm going to go to bed. It's 11:10. So guys, have a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you for tuning in and spending your time with me on a Wednesday, and appreciate everything. So guys, if you need me, you know where I am in the WhatsApp group. Any questions, any queries, just let me know. Have a lovely evening. Chat to you soon.